Hello everybody, I do hope you're all doing well. I'm the introverted astrologer and today I'm back with part 2 of my videos on King Charles and the royal family. We're going to take a look at the King's transits over the next year. We've already identified that the couple of months ahead could be a little tricky for the King, and that's because of his progressions and the forthcoming solar eclipse. I'll put a link for that video in the description below. We've also seen that the heavenly bodies associated with health, such as Chiron and Hygeia, have played a big role for the King this year, 2024. Will he be getting a break from the heavens next year? One of you has also raised the issue of Harry and his relationship with the royal family. Can we see any potential for reconciliation or possibly for forgiveness in the royal charts? We'll consider that today too, and let's go to the computer and start picking it apart. What kind of transits is the King currently experiencing? We knew that he was having an ongoing and difficult Pluto transit to his moon by square. This has been a lengthy and traumatic transit, and if you consider the issues that the King has had to deal with over this period, we can fully sympathise. There was doubtless that lengthy mourning process followed by his mother's death, but there have also been some very difficult family dynamics with his son Harry, and then the beginning of his own health trials. The moon can represent many things: family, mother, our emotional security, our stability. This also makes sense if we also consider that Pluto has been moving through the King's 6th whole sign house, which has Capricorn on the cusp. This 6th house is of course the house of our routines, our work, but most pertinently of our health too. And so this Pluto squaring the natal moon would likely have had an intense psychological impact with that great tension in family relationships, because Pluto also brings with it the power and control dimension, and so there's a potential for emotional games, for power tactics, and our own emotional patterns of relating and nurturing could be pulled out of the dark for our examination. We can see that Pluto's last contact with the King's moon is going to be around December of this year. Pluto's going to have some more work to do in the not too far away future. The King is going to have a slight break, but when Pluto moves through any house, it moves slowly and powerfully, and it operates through death, destruction, regeneration, transformation. And so its transits often bring to the surface parts of our life that have become decayed or stagnant. As Pluto contacts various points, it can trigger a series of crises through which we can transform and rebuild in the relevant areas of our life. Because Pluto is going to shortly move into the sign of Aquarius, this is the sign on the cusp of the King's 7th house. And so this means that all that powerful Plutonian force will be channeled into the King's 7th house of formal and business relationships. This could include his marriage and other critically important one-to-one relationships. We'll certainly be looking at these very hard in 2026 as Pluto first begins to nudge at the cusp of the King's 7th house. A very sensitive point. It will simultaneously square his north node, his Mercury, and so 2026 could bring some further intense overhauls, which will be ongoing for a couple of years. But back to the present, we can also see that transiting Neptune began to square his Uranus and his Jupiter earlier this year, and this transit won't be out of the way until early 2026. This one would certainly be a test of our grip on reality, because the energies of that simultaneous square to Uranus and to Jupiter aren't altogether realistic. We could waste our time pursuing dreams or concepts that aren't grounded. Our deeply held beliefs about what is true or real could be turned on their head. This could be because fresh information comes to light, secrets are suddenly exposed, or people around us reveal their true colours. This pressure that Neptune is applying has the potential to distort the king's perception of reality and his belief systems. But Neptune transits can be very refining and spiritualising, and this is something which stays with us long after the confusion or disorientation of the transit has passed. We were also looking at issues of reconciliation or perhaps forgiveness between royal family members. Which planets would we associate with these kind of issues? As mentioned, Neptune is a very spiritualising planet. It is also associated with Pisces, and this is a sign which is capable of unconditional love, of forgiveness, of spiritual wisdom. But we may also consider Jupiter because of that broad-minded ability to forgive. In fact, the King's Uranus-Jupiter opposition in his chart is such a very tight, partile aspect, and it is being brought to life very much this year. Although there are parts of this chart that are associated with less forgiving energies, we do have other very prominent placements, including this Venus-Neptune in Libra and this Jupiter, which show the potential for broad-mindedness, philosophical interests, kindness. Given the King's own outlook, perhaps he may have considered alternative healing practices under these transits and used them to supplement his cancer treatment. I think we know that the King has got a very inquiring, broad mind. We're aware that he's delved deeply into alternative medicine and homeopathy, for example, and there is also a strong fascination with more spiritual and religious matters. He has that innovative streak. He's someone who's very open to exploring the more unorthodox practices and belief systems. I'm bringing this up because we have seen a lot of play with this Uranus opposition this year, and that is going to continue. It was being emphasised by the solar arc midheaven moving to exactly conjunct it earlier this year, around March time. I mention this because I'm aware that the King's progressed midheaven will begin to make further strong aspects with this Uranus-Jupiter axis in 2027, and in fact shortly after making that contact, this progressed ascendant in midheaven will change sign. It's really important when progressed angles change sign, and so we can say that 2027 is going to be a very important year. How is the King going to fare under Saturn's contacts this year? Saturn and Neptune have both been transiting through the King's 8th whole sign house of Pisces. I'm sure we can all agree that the themes associated with the 8th house of crisis, death, transformation, intensity, regeneration, these have all been a major life theme for the King. Saturn will actually make a passing trine with the King's Sun early in 2025, but this is a one-time contact and I doubt it will amount to much. Saturn is also going to make a trine aspect with the King's natal Chiron. This is a part of the King's chart that we may see come to life during periods of difficult health, as we've seen recently. I think this trine from Saturn is going to give the King an opportunity to stabilise himself, to become grounded in the healing process. That's because Saturn brings reality and structure to the points that it contacts by transit. And its contact with this very sensitive, vulnerable Chiron could assist the King to adjust his boundaries and his routines, the support around him, and to pull things together into a way of living that allows him to heal and stabilise. Saturn's impact on the Uranus-Jupiter axis is likely to be one of restricting or curtailing the King's freedoms. This may be something that makes him chafe at the bit. Saturn will remove things from the king's life that don't work. He may be forced to stand still whether he likes it or not. The square to Uranus is going to compound the feelings of tension and frustration that the king will be feeling. The way he has structured his life may need to change, and so that patterns of living that he has become used to may have to adapt. If he has been too rigid, then this could be quite upsetting. The king has a chunk of planets in the fixed signs, so the loss of certain key habits and routines may be a little upsetting. Transiting Uranus will continue that ongoing conjunction to the fixed star Algol, and it will also oppose the king's natal Chiron. We've already seen how Chiron and the asteroid Hygeia have been prominent in the king's solar returns that we've looked at, and we can see this repeating pressure in these transits too. Now, the first time that Uranus contacts Chiron will be in June of 2025, and Saturn contacts Chiron in May 2025. So we are seeing some pressure being placed on this sensitive and very important asteroid. The royal family charts often have pronounced connections with Chiron and their sun. So we know that there is a wound to the solar principle. The sun needs to shine, and Chiron is effectively clipping its wings by forcing the king to shine in ways that are useful or purposeful for other people, for the public. It means that the sun cannot be its true self and shine in its own right. It has to modify or adapt to be an instrument of healing or serve a purpose for the larger public. And so the way the king has been moulded or shaped is going to be challenged or changed. Will transiting Chiron assist with this? It's moving through the sign of Aries in 2025, and it isn't going to play a prominent role. Jupiter is currently in the sign of Gemini, and it will be opposing the king's Mars very shortly in an ongoing transit which lasts until around May of 2025. Jupiter to Mars can also bring additional energy and ambition, but we would just have to be careful how we would harness it. And from that point on, Jupiter will move into the king's 12th whole sign house. It will trine the king's sun from this position, very much hinting at the further growth of spiritual faith. We could also think of Jupiter transiting through the 12th as being a little bit like having an angel on our shoulders, guiding and supporting us as it makes various connections with our planets and points. Now let's turn to the king's progressed moon. As you may know, when we use secondary progressions to forecast future events, we move one day forward in our ephemeris for every 1 year of life. And by using this method, we can see that the sun will move approximately 1 degree per year. This means that around his 76th birthday, the king's natal sun will have been progressed forward up to this point in Aquarius, but the progressed moon moves forward much more quickly because the moon normally moves around 13 degrees per day on average. And so if we track the moon's progress over the months, it will move roughly 1 degree for every month. Let's just begin by noting that the progressed moon here in Aquarius is now just a few degrees ahead of the progressed sun. And so the king is in the phase of the lunation cycle that we call the progressed new moon phase. This is a major life cycle. It spans some 30 years. And during this new moon phase, the moon has not long left an exact conjunction with the progressed sun. This marks a time when we often have a sense that something is over. It isn't necessarily clear yet what our new direction is to be. And there is often a feeling of gravitating towards a home or a base, as though we are searching for a safe place to be in and to hibernate. This phase of the lunation cycle has a fourth house feeling to it. So metaphorically, it is as though we are reconnecting with our own internal centre, deep within our soul. Because the King's progressed moon is currently in the sign of Aquarius and is in the King's 7th house, we can expect some stronger social awareness with this energy. There may be disruption and change during this period because, of course, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, and Uranus energies can be restless and unpredictable. But there will be a greater awareness too of affiliations and networks within society. This is a broad-minded and social energy, and we could particularly be drawn to organisations or movements which are for the greater good of society. And with that 7th house flavour, we could find ourselves drawing on the people around us much more, and we would become more aware of the need for compromise and harmony in our one-to-one relationships. And this too is more promising if we consider the need to heal rifts within the royal family network. Now we can see as we move through September, the King's progressed moon will be heading towards 16 degrees odd of Aquarius, and so the moon is going to oppose this natal Pluto. It will also simultaneously trine this natal Venus. And so what does this tell us about these few weeks? We could see an emphasis on socialising and pleasurable activities, but there would also be some darker emotional undercurrents, because this opposition with Pluto can often show us a time of upset. We might feel as though home life is unsettled. In fact, we can often see breakdowns and changes to our equipment and apparatus in our homes during tense contacts between our progressed moon and Pluto. So these few weeks are going to be pleasurable, more sociable, but there could also be a feeling of being emotionally disturbed or unsettled. Now, as we lead up to early February, this progressed moon is going to make a sextile with this natal Mars. This is going to be quite an energetic and invigorating connection, and we could see opportunities arise through which we can funnel our enthusiasm and our drive. The King's natal Mars has that flavour of actively pursuing philosophies and beliefs which enlarge his mind, and so opportunities could arise to pursue these matters too. As we move through March and April of next year, this progressed moon will square the King's natal Sun. These times of aspecting the Sun can often coincide with feeling under the weather, of lowered vitality. We might catch a bug. We could feel at odds with the world. And in September, we can see that this progressed moon will start forming a square aspect with the King's natal Chiron. As Chiron can represent wounding, hurts, illness, this might be a time which brings an emotional wound for some reason, or indeed a time when we are not feeling too well physically. We also need to be careful how we handle other people around us during these times because of these feelings of hurt. Now, as the moon enters the very last degree of Aquarius, it will make contact with the King's Jupiter-Uranus opposition, and so this could be a very exciting time when we are up for change and stimulation. We want to expand the boundaries of our mind, and I think this will mark a few positive and dynamic weeks for the King as the year draws to a close. Now we can see that the progressed moon is going to shift into the 8th house of the King's chart at some point during 2025. Our interpretation of exactly when this will happen depends very much on whether we're using a Placidus house system, such as we have here, or a whole sign chart, which would place the 8th house at 0 degrees of Pisces. Regardless of which one that we use, we can say that the 8th house is going to be a much more intense energy. There's going to be that focus on beginnings and endings, crisis, perhaps transformation, regeneration, and we tend to find power struggles might take on more prominence. And indeed, we may lose some of the things in our life during this emotionally intense time. And so this is something to consider as we move into 2026 and 2027, when we know that there are big changes coming. Some of you may have noticed over this weekend that key members of the royal family have publicly wished Harry a happy birthday. Are we going to see some further moves towards reconciliation? I'll certainly keep a lookout for this as I put together my next video, which will focus on Prince William and his coming year. Until then, take care. God bless you all and your families.